Good morning, this is Channel 17's news anchor Max Bryanstein reporting on the political effects of climate change, pollution, and more. Stay tuned. Climate change is one of the most heavily debated topics going on in the world today, not only politically, but also scientifically. Climate change has not only changed the world environmentally, but a whole new political party was formed. The Green Party, although it hasn't got much traction in the US, is more popular in places like Europe. Various green organizations banded together in late 1970s to form the Green Party in Europe in 1980. The Green Party did not get great numbers, however. The Green Party has never been that big in the US. In 2016, Dr. Jill Stein got 1.6% of the popular vote. The most votes the Green Party has ever gotten was in 2000, when they won 2.7% of the popular vote. The Green Party is said to not be as powerful in the US as it is in Europe, because in European electoral processes it is much kinder to small parties. Unlike the US, where it is much harder for a small party to gain traction, especially in presidential elections. The German Green Party first started in 1980 and elected the first Green official as Germany's foreign minister and vice chancellor from 1998 to 2005. Now we'll go out to my co-anchor, Dan Shipley. Now.
Thanks for the introduction, Max. I'm Dan Chapley here with my buddy Anthony Perkins, here to talk about the Paris Climate Agreement on an island. Anthony. Hi, I'm Anthony Perkins here to talk about the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, the Paris Climate Agreement is a global climate agreement that is formed by the United Nations on December 12th of 2015. Now, the goal of the agreement is to stop the global temperature from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, the reason that we even need the climate agreement is because climate change. And climate change all started during the industrial era. Now, this is obviously because of industrialization and fossil fuels being put into the air. Now, fossil fuels release carbon dioxide, which heats up the atmosphere, increasing the global temperature. The effects of all this carbon dioxide going into the air has not become apparent until quite recently, costing governments billions of dollars on average. The global temperature has risen 1.53 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0.85 degrees Celsius, since 1880. From 1983 to 2012, it was the warmest 30-year period in the last 1,400 years, and it's only rising all around the world. Now, the U.S. was supposed to contribute $3 billion towards the Paris Climate Agreement, or just under $10 per person. But President Trump pulled out of this deal, and the U.S. contributed only under $1 billion towards the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, that's only about $3 per person. Sweden is currently leading in the Paris Climate Agreement with just about $59 per person. In second place is Denmark with $58 per person. And the lowest of all the countries that are participating in the Paris Climate Agreement is South Korea with just about $2 per person. During the Industrial Revolution, coal and oil were being mined as the world's only reliable source of energy. Steam power was developed in the 1600s, but did not produce nearly as much energy as coal or oil. Natural gas and coal produced nearly 2/3 of the world's electricity combined. The effects of this reliance of coal and oil during the Industrial Revolution is being seen today, and the world is trying to move away from burning fossil fuels and turning to renewable energy. In 2012, about 13% of the world's energy was renewable energy, but in 2013, however, renewable energy accounted for about 22% of the world's total energy. The world's energy is expected to rise up to 26% in 2020. Now, what countries produce the most renewable energy, Anthony? Glad you asked, Dave. Well, Denmark produces nearly 140% of its energy through wind power alone, and gives about the excess energy to surrounding countries like Germany and Sweden and Norway. Now, Sweden is trying to run entirely on renewable energy. It is currently at 57% of its total energy is renewable, and Iceland has 100% of its energy is renewable energy. Thanks for that talk about renewable energy and the Paris Climate Agreement, Anthony. Now, back to you in the studio, Max.
Another big concern about climate change is whether or not it could start any large-scale wars. Many high-profile scientists believed that climate change could have helped push over the war in Syria. Now, however, Barack Obama said in a 2015 interview, climate change did not cause the wars we see around the world, but drought and crop failures helped push him over the edge. But however, Bernie Sanders said that climate change is directly linked to terrorism. If we continue to rely on fossil fuels and natural gas, wars could be started because of the lack of them we have in the future. Battles over territory and natural resources, which we have never seen before. It is said that 815 million people are currently suffering from the lack of food and hunger. Pope Francis said in a 2017 interview, the relationship between hunger and migrations can only be faced if we go to the roots of the problem. What he means by this is we must try and stop climate change, or at least keep it stagnant, to not make the problem any worse. The Pope talked about studies by the United Nations and civil society groups that surpass the problems of hunger, migrations. There are two main obstacles we must overcome: conflicts and climate change. He describes how climate change causes problems every day, but thanks to modern science, we can overcome these problems. Many of the world's greatest cities are currently under threat due to climate change. This is because of the rising sea levels and the melting of the Arctic. Now, the Arctic is melting because of emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere, warming up the Earth, and a new study by scientists in 2016 says how the projection nearly doubles for prior estimates of sea level rise within the next 100 years. To talk more about this, my associate, D'Angelo. Come here, D'Angelo.
Thanks, Max. For the record, my name's not D'Angelo, it's Francisco. But politically, the world is very divided on the climate change topic. So the world's divided into two major categories: the ones that believe in climate change and the ones that don't believe in them, obviously. So the United States is a prime example of this. The United States has about half of the country divided, thinking that climate change is true, and half the country thinking that it's false. The people that think it's true want to spend a lot of money and try their hardest to stop it, while the people that think it's false think it'll just be a waste of money and don't think that there's any scientific data to back it up. So the world as a whole is very divided. Like, Europe believes, or specifically Western Europe, is more progressive and has more countries trying their best, like the countries in the Paris Agreement, to stop this and to try and work on making renewable resources and work their best to stop climate change. While the Eastern countries that were in the former Soviet Union, like Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and most of those countries, they're generally more conservative. And they believe that climate change is a myth, and they believe that it's not worth it. Not worth all the money.
Do you have anything else to say about climate change or anything else about the matter? Francisco?
Yes, obviously I do. I can always talk about climate change. Now, if we go more eastward, if we go to Asia, where most of the countries are developing and don't use renewable resources, they rely on more old resources like oil and coal. The Middle East, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, they need oil the most out of all the countries in the world. They rely on it. It saves their economies. Without oil, they would just be just a bunch of desert that nobody cares about. Oil has saved their economies in the last 10 years. They were old, poor countries around 10 or 20 years ago, but oil has made their people more wealthy and their country as a whole more wealthy. If we go over to China and East Asia, they create a lot of pollution, and even though they're trying to go to renewable resources, their countries have so many people, like India, China, and Indonesia. They have so many people that they can't just easily go over to renewable energy, and they need to use coal and things like that. Now, if we go to Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, the more Western countries of the East, they are the ones that use more renewable energy. They are more allied with Europe and America, so they're trying their best to go to renewable energy and make the world a better place.
Climate change is still a huge epidemic, and it's only getting worse. As developed countries try to fix the mistakes made in the past, and as the world races towards renewable energy, they may not be doing it fast enough. Thousands of dollars being spent every single day to try to reverse the mistakes we made in the past. As countries become more developed, and we can see a trend towards renewable energy, but it's not the developed countries that get hit the hardest by climate change. It costs just as much money as it does in lives for undeveloped countries every single year. as all we can do now is look at the mistakes we made in the past and try not to make them again. This is Channel...
Go!
No,
Go!
stop.
This is Channel 17 News with the best news anchor ever, me.